Chapter 20. The morning after Mrs. Hawkins's visit and Coco's stellar performance with the dictionary, Quillerin waked before the alarm clock rang and bounded out of bed. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place. Tate must have had a grudge against the Fluxion ever since the coverage of the paternity trial. The family had probably tried to hush it up, but the Fluxion would naturally insist that the public has a right to know. None of the agonizing details had been spared. Perhaps the Rampage had dealt more kindly with the Tates. It was owned by the Penimans, who were part of the Muggy Swamp clique. For 18 years, Tate had lived with his grudge, letting it grow into an obsession. Despite his subdued exterior, he was a man of strong passions. He probably hated the Fluxion as fervently as he loved Jade. His ulcers were evidence of inner turmoil, and when the Fluxion offered to publish his house, he saw an opportunity for revenge. He could fake a theft, hide the Jades, and let them be recovered after the newspaper had simmered in its embarrassment. What would be a safe hiding place for a teapot as thin as a rose petal? Quillerin asked himself as he prepared Coco's breakfast. But would Tate go to such lengths for the meager satisfaction of revenge? He would need a stronger motive. Perhaps he was not so rich as his position indicated. He had lost the manufacturing plant. He had gambled on a jade expedition that failed to produce. He owed a large decorating bill. Had he devised a scheme to collect insurance? Had he and his wife argued about it? Had they quarreled on the night of the alleged theft? Had the quarrel been violent enough to cause a fatal heart attack? Quillerin placed Coco's breakfast on the kitchen floor, slipped into his suit coat, and started filling his pockets. Here and there around the apartment, he collected his pipe, tobacco pouch, matches, card case, a comb, some loose silver, his bill clip, and a clean handkerchief. But he could not find the green jade button that usually rattled around in his change pocket. He remembered leaving it on the desktop. "Coco, did you steal my lucky piece?" Quillerin said. "Yargle," came the reply from the kitchen, a yowl gargled with a throatful of veal kidneys in cream. Once more, Quillerin opened the envelope of photographs he was going to deliver to Tate. He spread them on the desk. Wide-angle pictures of beautiful rooms, medium shots of expensive furniture groupings, and close-ups of the Jades. There was a perfect shot of the rare white teapot, as well as one of the bird perched on the back of a lion. There was a black writing desk, black ebony and black marble, heavily ornamented with gilded bronze, the table supported by a sphinx, the white silk chairs that did not look comfortable. Coco rubbed against Quillerin's ankles. "What's on your mind?" the man said. "I made your breakfast. Go and finish it. You've hardly touched that food." The cat arched his back, curved his tail into a question mark, and walked back and forth over the newsman's shoes. "You're getting your playmate today," Quillerin said. "A little cross-eyed lady cat. Maybe I should take you along. Would you like to put on your harness and go for a ride?" Coco pranced in figure eights with long-legged grace. "First, I've got to punch another hole in your harness." The kitchen offered no tools for punching holes in leather straps. No awl, no ice pick, no sixpenny nails, not even an old-fashioned can opener. Quillerin managed the operation with the point of a nail file. "There," he said, as he went to look for Coco. "I defy you to slip out of it again. Now, where the heck did you go?" There was a wet, slurping, scratching sound, and Quillerin wheeled around. Coco was on the desk. He was licking a photograph. "Hey!" yelled Quillerin, and Coco jumped to the floor and bounded away like a rabbit. The newsman examined the prints. Only one of them was damaged. "Bad cat," he said. "You've blistered this beautiful photo." Coco sat under the coffee table, hunched in a small bundle. It was the Biedermeier armoire he had licked with his sandpaper tongue. The surface of the photograph was still sticky. From one angle, the damage was hardly noticeable. Only when the light hit the picture in a certain way could the dull and faintly blistered patch be noticed. Quillerin examined it closely and marveled at the detail in Bunsen's photo. The grain of the wood stood out clearly, and whatever lighting the photographer had used gave the furniture a three-dimensional quality. The chased metal around the tiny keyhole was in bold relief. A fine line of shadow accentuated the edge of the drawer across the bottom. There was another thin, dark line down the side panel of the armoire that Quillerin had not noticed before. It sliced through the grain of the wood. It hardly made sense in the design or construction of the cabinet. Quillerin felt a prickling in his mustache and stroked it hurriedly. Then he grabbed Coco and trussed him in his harness. "Let's go," he said. "You've licked something that gives me ideas." It was a long and expensive taxi ride to Muggy Swamp. Quillerin listened to the click of the meter and wondered if he could put this trip on his expense account. The cat sat on the seat close to the man's thigh, but as soon as the taxi turned into the Tate driveway, Coco was alerted. He rose on his hind legs, placed his front paws on the window, and scolded the landscape. Quillerin told the driver, "I want you to wait and take me back to town. I'll probably be a half hour." "Okay if I go to the railway station and get some breakfast?" the man asked. "I'll stop the meter." Quillerin tucked the cat under his left arm, coiled the leash in his left hand, and rang the doorbell of the Spanish mansion. As he stood waiting, he detected a note of neglect about the premises. The grass was badly in need of cutting. Curled yellow leaves, the first of the season to fall, were swirling around the courtyard. The windows were muddied. When the door opened, it was a changed man who stood there. Tate, despite his usual high color, looked strained and tired. The old clothes and tennis shoes he wore were in absurd contrast to the black and white marble elegance of the foyer. Muddied footprints had dried on the white marble squares. "Come in," said Tate. "I was just packing some things away." He made an apologetic gesture toward his garb. "I brought Coco along," said Quillerin coolly. "I thought he might help in finding the other cat." And he thought, something has gone wrong, or he's scared, or the police have been questioning him. Have they linked the murder of his decorator with the theft of his jades? Tate said, "The other cat's here. It's locked up in the laundry room." Coco squirmed and was transferred to Quillerin's shoulder, where he could survey the scene. The cat's body was taut, and Quillerin could feel a vibration like a low-voltage electric current. He handed the envelope of photographs to Tate and accepted an offhand invitation into the living room. It had changed considerably. The white silk chairs were shrouded with dust covers. The draperies were drawn across the windows, and the jade cases were dark and empty. One lamp was lighted in the shadowy room, a lamp on the writing desk where Tate had apparently been working. A ledger lay open there, and his collection of utilitarian jades was scattered over the desk, the primitive scrapers, chisels, and axe heads. Tate yanked a dust cover off a desk-side chair and motioned Quillerin to sit down, while he himself stood behind the desk and opened the envelope. The newsman glanced at the ledger upside down. It was a catalog of the jade collection, written in a precise, slanted hand. While the jade collector studied the photographs, Quillerin studied the man's face. This is not the look of grief, he thought. This is exhaustion. The man has not been sleeping well. His plan is not working out. Tate shuffled through the photographs, crimping the corners of his mouth and breathing heavily. "Pretty good photography, isn't it?" said Quillerin. "Yes," Tate murmured. "Surprising detail. I didn't realize he had taken so many pictures." "We always take more than we know we can use." Quillerin cast a side glance at the armoire. There was no fine dark line down the side of the cabinet, at least none that could be discerned from where he sat. Tate said, "This desk photographed well. It has a lot of contrast. Too bad there's no picture of the Biedermeier wardrobe." He watched Tate closely. "I don't know what happened. I was sure Bunsen had photographed the wardrobe." Tate maneuvered the corners of his mouth. "It's a fine piece. It belonged to my grandfather." Coco squirmed again and voiced a small protest, and the newsman stood up, strolled back and forth, and patted the silky back. He said, "This is the first time this cat has gone visiting. I'm surprised he's so well behaved." He walked close to the armoire, and still he could see no fine dark line. "Thank you for the pictures," Tate said. "I'll go and get the other cat." When the collector left the room, Quillerin's curiosity came to a boil. He walked to the armoire and examined the side panel. There was indeed a crack running vertically from top to bottom, but it was virtually invisible. Quillerin ran his finger along the line. It was easier to feel than to see. Only the camera, with its uncanny vision, had observed clearly the hairline joining. Coco was struggling now, and Quillerin placed him on the floor, keeping the leash in his hand. Experimentally, he ran his free hand up and down the crevice. He thought, "It must be a concealed compartment. It's got to be. But how does it open?" There was no visible hardware of any kind. He glanced toward the foyer, listened for approaching footsteps, then applied himself to the puzzle. Was it a touch latch? Did they have touch latches in the old days? The cabinet was over 100 years old. He pressed the side panel and thought that it had a slight amount of give, as if it were less than solid. He pressed again, and it responded with a tiny cracking noise, like the sound of old, dry wood. He pressed the panel hard along the edge of the crack, first at shoulder level, then higher, then lower. He reached up and pressed it at the top, and the side of the armoire slowly opened with a labored groan. It opened only an inch or two. Cautiously, Quillerin increased the opening enough to see what was inside. His lips formed a silent exclamation. For a moment, he was transfixed. He felt a prickle in his blood, and he forgot to listen for footsteps. Coco's ears were pivoting in alarm. Tennis shoes were coming noiselessly down the corridor, but Quillerin didn't hear. He didn't see Tate enter the room, stop abruptly, move swiftly. He heard only the piercing soprano scream, and then it was too late. The scene blurred in front of his eyes, but he saw the spike. He heard the snarls and blood-chilling shrieks. There was a shock of white lightning. The lamp crashed. In the darkness, he saw the uplifted spike, saw the spiraling white blur, felt the tug at his hand, heard the great wrenching thud, felt the sharp pain, felt the trickle of blood, and heard a sound like escaping steam. Then all else was still. Quillerin leaned against the armoire and looked down. Blood was dripping from his fingertips. The leash was cutting into his other palm, and 12 feet of nylon cord were wound tightly around the legs of G. Vernon Tate, who lay gasping on the floor. Coco, anchored at the other end of the leash, was squirming to slip out of his harness. The room was silent, except for the hard breathing of the prisoner and the hissing of a female cat on top of the Biedermeier armoire.